Hey everyone, welcome to this episode. What we're going to do today is I'm going to talk about this idea of this quote, that fear only exists in the mind. And actually, the quote's by Dale Carnegie, and I think it actually reads that fear doesn't exist anywhere except the mind. Um, and I wanted to just really talk on this point because it almost sounds so obvious that we miss like the profoundness of the statement. So before we dive in, I just wanted to give you guys a heads up that I'm going to be hosting a live workshop on August 19th and August 20th, again of 2022, and there's a link down in the notes. And again, it's gonna be an awesome workshop. I'm really pumped about it. Going to be covering all sorts of stuff when it comes to breaking free from OCD and anxiety, talking about belief structures, AAA response, right, and really just talking about it from a very high level. So I wanted to give you guys the heads up about that. It is a live workshop. There are limited seats, so please claim your seat and register today to make sure that you can get there. And if you can't make it for some reason, when you register for the workshop, you'll also get access to the replays. So let's go ahead and dive into this topic real quick. Fear only exists in the mind. Now we know, right, that our mind is where fear is produced. Okay. And what I mean by that is we understand that even from a biological level, right? When you're talking about the amygdala, you're talking about the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response, right? We understand that our brains generate that are like internally, like our brain has the ability to generate this fear response in our body that then we feel, right? And then ultimately propels us into action. And that response was, you know, designed ultimately to keep us alive. And it served us well for a long time, especially, times when we were in the open plains and threats were, rampant. But when we hear the idea of fear only exists in the mind, and this is something I've pondered for a long time because, as someone who's worked, obviously struggled with fear in my own life when it comes to things like OCD and anxiety, and had my own run-ins in the past, especially with that. And then now have the opportunity to work with, I don't know at this point how many people I've worked with, but, definitely hundreds, if not thousands, when it comes to my group program, as well as, all the podcasts and videos and all that stuff. I've often wondered this point because what's so interesting, and the point I've wondered about is there such thing as legitimate fear? And I know your first answer might be like, well, obviously, Matt, the one I'm afraid of, right? That's because that's most of our answers, right? Of course, there's legitimate fears. There's the ones I have. And then one of the funnest things about doing groups, and one of the reasons I'm such a believer in group, right? So for those of you that aren't a part of the group program, Taking Back Control or Taking Back Control Plus, one of the things that group does for people is that you get to listen to other people talk about their fears, and you get to see fear objectively. And that's an experience that can't really be gained anywhere else other than in a group format where people are willing to talk openly about fear. Because most of our fear is subjective, right? It's just what we experience. And because we experience it, we just believe that it's real. We have that confirmation bias, right? And in a sense, it is real to us. But what happens is when you get two people talking about their fears, they both see in many ways the absurdity of the mind and how it can just totally blow an idea out of proportion, over exaggerate, create a false, narrative and bodily reaction within you, convincing you that you're in danger when you're really not. Because again, danger is obviously real. There is like, look, when, if when I was, seeing a train, right, coming at me, right, like that's real danger. If I don't move, like there is an inherent like negative effect that's going to happen of that, right? Someone pointing a gun at me is danger, right? someone, like a lion, like being face to face with a lion in no cage. It's like, yeah, that could be dangerous, right? Like danger does exist in the world. But the question is that's not what we're talking about. See, oftentimes we misidentify, or I don't know the word really that I'm looking for, but we assume that fear and danger are the same. And they're not. Fear is just in the mind. It's the only place it exists. And so because of that, when I've sat and worked through my own fears, as well as seen so many other people wrestle with various fears, from contamination to driving to panic attacks to fearing fear itself to intrusive thoughts, you can pretty much list it. I've pretty much seen the fear and worked with someone with that fear. And the question I always come back to is there a legitimate fear? Is there such thing? And this question might bother you, right? Because, and here's the reason, and here's why it bothers me, is, and I don't mean to project that onto you, but at least this is, in the conversations I've had, this is just kind of where the conversation goes. If fear only exists in the mind, meaning that it's not outside of me, right? There's no such thing as fear that's outside of me. There's actual real danger inside, but just because I'm afraid of something doesn't mean it's dangerous. Danger is present moment. It's very clear. When you're in danger, you know you're in danger. There's an extreme clarity that comes with it. And it's almost as if like time slows down, right? Because you see it's clear and present danger. Versus when fear, it's always kind of futuristic, or it's past, right? And it's these ideas about danger potentially happening. And what's so interesting is so many of our decisions in life are made based on fear, right? We make decisions out of fear. Fear controls a lot of our lives sometimes. I know for me, fear controlled, virtually most of my life for several years, when I was really, really lost in it. And you read a quote like from, obviously a very intelligent person, much more intelligent than myself. That's what I love reading, people from the past. It's because you see some of the great thinkers, right? Like Dale Carnegie. And this idea of fear doesn't exist anywhere but in the mind, except the mind. It's like once you realize that, then the only place that you really have to face fear is in the mind, or internally in the body. It has nothing to do with your outside world. And when you start to look at other people's fears, and then you start to see how, I'm going to use this term very loosely just because, and I don't mean it disrespectfully to anyone else, but when you start to see someone who fears something you don't, you see it as ridiculous. Like, that makes no sense for you to fear that. It makes no sense for you to spend your life doing that because of this one fear. Not realizing that person looks at you and thinks the same thing. And then it leaves us to question, like, is there such thing as a legitimate fear that's worth our time and energy, worth us spending today being afraid of it tomorrow? And that's just a question that's always, dare I say, ruffled my feathers, if you will, because it's a hard thing to sit with. Because you're forced to the confrontation of, how am I letting fear control my life? And should I be letting fear control my life in any way, if fear only really exists in the mind? And because, I can say for absolute certainty, when I've made choices out of fear, they're usually the lowest choices that I've made, in the lowest state of consciousness, and often led to negative results. Versus when I've made choices from places of trust, abundance, love, joy, generally leads to much better results in my life. So the more we allow fear in our life, oftentimes the more negative repercussions it has, because we make decisions based on that fear. and we justify it, right? And it seems to make sense to us in that moment. But if you look back in your past and things that maybe you were afraid of at one time but no longer are, this is where you can really start to see things clearly in your life. Is hey, like, when I look at that, was I making good choices in that time? For me, the answer is obvious, absolutely not, right? When I was really lost in the OCD and anxiety loop, very clearly not making good decisions, right? Making very harmful decisions even. They felt right in the time, based on my feelings, but they by far and above weren't. And then the real step of saying, you know what, those same decisions made out of fear today with whatever I fear right now are probably equally harmful. And when you can really look at that and you realize that fear only exists in the mind, you begin to work from that place of like, there's nothing I need to do outside of me. There's no work outside of me that I need to do when it comes to facing fear, because it only exists within. So there's no person I need to change in the outside environment. No, I don't need to move cities. I don't need to, control anything in my environment for all intents and purposes. And I literally just need to work within. That's the starting point right there of really breaking free from fear. And sitting with the question, is there such thing as legitimate fear? Is just a question. I'm not going to, pose a yes or no. I mean, I have my thoughts on it, but again, it's like, it's such an abstract idea, right? Because obviously fear exists, right? We all experience it, but is there a legitimate fear? That's the question that I want to pose today. And just sitting with yourself and just answering it for yourself. And whatever answer you come up with is okay. It's just where you are, right? But it's just something that I want to pose because it's always something that I've thought about and wrestled with, especially working in this field for an extended time. So hope this was, helpful, good food for thought for the day. And again, live workshop, August 19th, August 20th, link in the notes. Make sure to register because we will be live. And so to claim that live spot, please do so because we are going to have limited spots. It is going to be on Zoom. So with that said, hope you guys have a wonderful week as always and look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Take care.